What's up, everybody? Today is the feast day of the great Pope Saint John Paul II. He's right there. And so he is someone who has been very influential on my own faith life. I even named my son John Paul after him. So I wanted to share with you today on his feast day, October 22nd, 5 things that I just love and have learned and have changed my life from the teachings of St. John Paul. The first is that in his teachings of the theology of the body, he talks about how the body is like a language. You've all heard of body language, but he specified that what we do with our body is really the only way that another person can know what's going on with us. Even if we're writing or talking to them on the phone when we can't see them, it's still through our body that we express those things. And so he says that the body is a language, and really how we treat one another speaks so loudly. And he talks about it in the realm of sexuality, but it also spills over into other areas of our life. Like if I am ignoring the poor person who needs something and I have an excess, what does that say about what am I speaking as I walk by them or as I ignore them? What does it say with the way I treat my romantic partner or really any of my friends? What we do with our body and what we say with our body speaks truth, or should speak truth, and oftentimes what we do, it doesn't speak truth, it speaks falsehood about the dignity of the human person. The second thing that I've learned from John Paul II is about the proper relationship of faith and reason, or in Latin, fides et ratio, in that our faith is not merely reasonable, it's not merely something that we can think about logically, but it does make sense, and we should use our minds to apprehend to the extent that we can, the great mysteries of God. And he talks about how, through studying science, that can keep our faith from devolving into fundamentalism and superstition, but also faith can keep science from kind of a false sense of the absolute and a false sense of certainty that there is this great mystery to the world. So I love the way he articulated the relationship between faith and reason. The third, I love the way he talked about the gospel of life, the good news of life, or his encyclical in Latin was called Evangelion vitae. And he talked, when we think about being pro-life, especially as Catholics, we tend to focus on the abortion issue, which of course is a super important issue and should be the focus of much of our work. But he also talked about euthanasia. He also talked about care for the poor. He also talked about care for the environment, way before that was a cool thing to be talking about in Catholic circles, and just talking about, he talked about certain criticisms of economic systems, both of socialism and of capitalism, and how in different ways each of those can be an offense against human dignity if not done in the right way. So he just had a really holistic way of looking at the world and looking at human issues and lifting up the value of human life and defending human life. He had great critiques of war and the way we use force and of the death penalty and just the way that we just tend to do business as usual as humans. And he pointed out a lot of ways that we're not very pro-life in those things. Fourth, I love that John Paul II embraced the global church. He traveled more than any other pope in history by far. Some people estimate that he was the most seen person in the history of the world, meaning more people actually saw him in real life than saw any other person in the history of the entire world, because everywhere he went, millions of people would show up. And he went to South America and Asia and Africa, and he visited the entire world, places that popes had never gone before. And it really spread the message that the church is worldwide. It's not just this European expression of Christianity. It really is something for the whole world. And he went and he participated in different types of liturgies and embraced the cultures and customs of people from all over the world, and really helped the church embrace its Catholicity. Catholic, of course, means universal, and that it's not just for one culture or for one people, it's really for all people. The fifth lesson I've learned from John Paul II, and this one's a little more personal, is to not let fear get in the way of reconciliation. One of the things that he did that made a lot of people, he's pretty much universally beloved now in the Catholic Church, but back in the day, he was pretty controversial, and there were a lot of people that really were kind of up in arms when he first started doing some things early on in his pontificate. And one of the things that got people really up in arms was that he tried to reconcile with populations that were traditionally oppressed and marginalized by Christians. So he would apologize to Jews and to Muslims, and he would show up to their services and pray with them and meet with them. And that's kind of something we expect from a pope nowadays, but that was unheard of back when he first started doing it, and a lot of people gave him grief for it. And I find that in my own life, a lot of times I'm afraid of reconciling with people because I'm afraid of how it looks. I'm afraid of how it looks to them, how they're going to see me in the future. So I learned not to let fear get in the way of reconciliation. And so those are 5 things I've learned from St. John Paul II that have just been super helpful for me, informative for me in my faith life. And so if you have others that were really formative for you, I hope you post those in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. May we all learn to imitate him and his great love for people and his great love for the Lord. St. John Paul II, pray for us.